Hello and welcome to What the F*** Just Happened Today, your essential guide to the daily shock and awe in national politics. I'm Joe Amditis. Let's get to it. It's Wednesday, October 19th, 2022. Welcome to day 638. Vladimir Putin declared martial law in the 4 Russian-occupied regions of Ukraine that it doesn't entirely control. The move follows Moscow's internationally condemned staged referendums and illegal annexation last month. Speaking to his Security Council via video feed, Putin said the martial law order was necessary because the Ukrainian government refused to accept the sham referendums, which he claimed was the will of the people. Russian forces, however, have repeatedly lost ground to the Ukrainian counteroffensive efforts in the annexed territories. The head of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council warned that Putin's order was, quote, preparation for the mass deportation of the Ukrainian population to depressed areas of Russia in order to change the ethnic composition of the occupied territory, end quote. Joe Biden added that Putin's slowed military invasion has put the Russian leader in an incredibly difficult position, which may lead him to, quote, brutalize individual citizens in Ukrainian citizens, to try to intimidate them into capitulating, end quote. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Antony Blinken accused China of planning to seize Taiwan on a much faster timeline than previously thought. Quote, there has been a change in the approach from Beijing toward Taiwan in recent years, Blinken said, adding that China had made a, quote, fundamental decision that the status quo was no longer acceptable, and that Beijing was determined to pursue reunification on a much faster timeline, end quote. Chinese President Xi Jinping, meanwhile, used a widely watched speech to say that the wheels of history are, quote, rolling on towards China's reunification, end quote, with Taiwan. Xi added, quote, we reserve the option of taking all measures necessary, end quote. China has refrained from publicly criticizing Russia's war in Ukraine, and while China and Russia don't have a formal alliance, the two countries do have a so-called no-limits partnership. Back in the United States, mortgage applications dropped to a 25-year low as mortgage rates reached a 20-year high. New single-family home construction and permit applications for single-family dwellings fell last month. Homebuilder sentiment also fell to its lowest level since the early days of the pandemic. Meanwhile, 52% of Americans have considered holding second jobs to pay their living expenses as inflation hits a 4-decade high in September. In Wisconsin, a taxpayers group asked the Supreme Court to block Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. The Brown County Taxpayers Association filed the request for emergency relief, arguing that the Biden administration overstepped its executive powers and circumvented Congress, and that the program would cost taxpayers more than the $400 billion that the CBO estimated. The request was filed to Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who is likely to refer the matter to the full court. The Biden administration has been sued by at least 7 states and 2 organizations over the forgiveness plan, which began accepting applications for debt relief on Monday. Meanwhile, Donald Trump appeared for a deposition as part of the defamation case brought against him by E. Jean Carroll, who Trump described as, quote, not my type, end quote, when denying her allegation that he raped her in a dressing room at Bergdorf Goodman nearly 3 decades ago. Trump had tried for 3 years to delay the defamation case and avoid a deposition, but a federal judge ordered him to appear under oath and answer questions, saying that he, quote, should not be able to run out the clock, end quote. And finally, a federal judge ordered John Eastman to turn over 4 emails to the January 6th committee because they're related to an attempted crime. Eastman is the lawyer who promoted the legal theory that Mike Pence could block or delay the Electoral College certification and overturn Biden's victory. U.S. District Court Judge David Carter wrote an 18-page opinion in which he says Easton's emails show that, quote, President Trump knew that the specific numbers of voter fraud were wrong, but continued to tout those numbers, both in court and to the public, end quote. Trump and his attorneys alleged in a December 4th filing in Georgia that Fulton County had improperly counted more than 10,000 votes of dead people, felons, and unregistered voters. On December 31st, Eastman emailed the other Trump lawyers that the numbers filed in state court were not accurate. Trump, however, signed the legal documents knowing the evidence of election fraud was false. The judge wrote, quote, the court finds that these emails are sufficiently related to and in furtherance of a conspiracy to defraud the United States. That's all for now. You can find the links and sources for all of these stories on the main website. And as always, visit whatthefjusthappenedtoday.com for the latest news and headlines. Until next time, I'm Joe Amditis.